Welcome to Massey College and welcome to this music salon. My name is Nathalie Desrosiers and I'm the principal of Massey College. It's my great pleasure to welcome you here. I want to first acknowledge the land on which Massey College is built. It's built on land that has been inhabited by Indigenous people for thousands of years. It was the land of the Yonwanda, the Seneca, and it is the treaty land of the Mississaugas of the Credit. And I want to acknowledge our duty of stewardship toward this land and the great privilege that we have to do our work here. Tonight, we're celebrating the Métis culture. This music salon, we are still here. Métis art music in Canada is part of a larger series that we have on ensuring that we understand music in its diversity and its complexity. And I know that the Massey community loves the music salon. So I want to, without further ado, pass the mic to our animator tonight, Hannah Chen Hartley, for leading us into this great discussion. Hannah.
Thank you, Natalie, for the land acknowledgement and introduction to tonight's Massey Music Salon. And a warm welcome to you all joining us online. As Natalie noted, I'm Hannah Chan Hartley. I'm a musicologist, a Quadrangle Society member at Massey College, and host of tonight's event as one of the members of the programming committee for the Massey College Music Society. Tonight, we're excited to present a music salon that centers on a powerfully moving piece, 5 orchestral songs on poems by Marilyn Dumont, composed in 2017 by Métis composer Ian Cusson. Marilyn Dumont is of Cree-Métis ancestry, and the 5 poems Mr. Kusan chose for his song cycle speak to the legacy of Canada's colonial history and how it continues in the lived experience of First Nations and Métis communities. He's joined by Mezzo Soprano Rebecca Cuddy, the piece's first interpreter, and by Massey College Junior Fellow and music historian Rena Roussin. Together, they will present the 5 songs and talk about the poems that inspired them, the process of writing and performing them, and their collective experience of advocacy for Indigenous voices in the performing arts. And I thought I'd note here that Ian, Rebecca, and Rena are all current members of the Indigenous Circle of Artists at the Canadian Opera Company. Before I introduce our guests, I want to let everyone know that there will be a short period for Q&A at the end of the presentation. And those of you online, if you have any comments or questions you'd like to share, please do so in the chat column on the right side of the video stream. And if we have time, we'll select from those for the Q&A at the end. So let me introduce to you our guests tonight. Ian Cusson is a composer of art song, opera, and orchestral work. Of Métis and French-Canadian descent, his work explores Canadian Indigenous experience, including the history of the Métis people, the hybridity of mixed racial identity, and the intersection of Western and Indigenous cultures. He's the recipient of the Chalmers Professional Development Grant, the National Aboriginal Achievement Foundation Award, and grants through the Canada Council, Ontario Arts Council, and the Toronto Arts Council. Ian was an inaugural Carrefour composer in residence with the National Arts Centre Orchestra for 2017 to 2019, and is currently the composer in residence for the Canadian Opera Company. Welcome, Ian.
Thanks for having me.
Métis mezzo-soprano Rebecca Cuddy has been nominated for 2 Dora Awards and is a joint winner of the Dora Award for Outstanding Ensemble Work in the Soundstreams production 2 Odysseys, Pimutawin and Galabartnit. Other recent highlights include the world premiere of Riel, Heart of the North, with the Regina Symphony Orchestra, and the world premiere of Oshana Ditit with Tapestry Opera and Opera on the Avalon. She is a current member of the Canadian Opera Company Circle of Artists, a Grand Council member for the Indigenous Performing Arts Alliance, and the current Indigenous Artist in Residence at the National Theatre School of Canada, where she is studying directing, playwriting, acting, and design. Hi, Rebecca. And finally, Junior Fellow Rena Roussin is a doctoral student in musicology at the University of Toronto, where she is a member of the Centre for the Study of 19th Century Music and a research scholar of the Institute for Canadian Music. Her research interests include Joseph Haydn's sacred vocal music, constructions of gender and sexuality in classical and romantic opera, and strategies of Indigenous decolonization and activism in Canadian art music. Her publications appear in Haydn the online journal of the Haydn Society of North America, and Musicological Explorations. To the best of her knowledge, she is the first Indigenous woman in Canada to study historical musicology. Welcome, Rena, and welcome to all three of you.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for the introductions and for moderating the event and for sharing our biographies. Tanchwe, Rena Roussin, Dishnakal Sean. For those of you who don't speak Michif, hello, my name is Rena Roussin. I'm so excited to be here tonight. I'm honored to welcome Ian and Rebecca, two very dear friends in my life, to the Massey College community for the next couple of hours. Excuse me, not the next couple of hours, the next hour and 15 minutes. I overinflated that, apparently. Welcome to Massey, to both of you, and welcome to everyone who is here listening tonight. I'm especially honored to be sharing this space with all of you, in that, to the best of our knowledge, this is actually the first ever Métis panel on art music, where the moderator, the composer, the performer are all of the Métis Nation. So I'm really excited to share this tiny moment of history of music in Canada with all of you. And with that, I think I'm going to start asking some questions. Ian, Rebecca, I would love to start by asking what being Métis, and specifically being Métis artists, means to the two of you.
I'll have a go. Well, first of all, being Métis is a complicated and not uncontroversial. It's certainly a controversial point in our world today and in the country. Certainly, being Métis and being a Métis artist, I'll say, is a person who comes from a particular community, and that community is a broad one, and it has a diaspora to it, and creating work from the lens and the vantage point that one has coming from that community of origin. And so, yeah, in terms of the work that I make, one of the ways that I explore Métis experience is really by trying to elevate and represent texts that are important and significant. For example, the texts of the work that we're going to hear tonight, and to cast them in a different light, to shine a different light on them, in a sense. Yeah, so that's a little bit of what it means for me to be a Métis artist.
Rebecca, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Of course. For me, being a Métis artist and sharing and being open about being a Métis artist means that I can bring my entire self to the work that I do and tell stories that maybe haven't been heard before. It's, as Ian says, being Métis, it's a nuanced thing. There's not sort of one or the other. It's not a binary. There's lots of facets of being Métis, which is why I love these songs so much, because they explore all of those. Sorry, I'm catching a glimpse of myself in this. These songs bring so much in that they allow us to explore the culture in a little bit more depth, and maybe, yeah, I'll stop there. It means that I can be my whole self as an artist.
Yeah, that makes me want to share an anecdote of, in the before times, before the pandemic, I had the incredible good luck to see Rebecca perform several of these pieces live at a Confluence concert series. And I just remember we became friends the day before that concert, and we were just hugging in the bathroom 5 minutes before the concert started, and we were like, I get to share who I am with the audience, and like, I remember we just had this moment of going like, we deserve to be here. And for me, this song cycle is this reclamation of the fact that we've always belonged in these spaces.
And we deserve to see ourselves on stage and hear the sounds of our culture. And this is why I love Ian's music so much. And I'm going to say it over and over and gosh, but we hear the sounds of our culture so much in what Ian composes, which is why I think these songs resonate and why we're starting to hear them more and more across the land.
Yeah.
So sorry, I totally interrupted you, Rena.
Well, you actually gave me a brilliant segue into my next question, which is, Ian, I wonder if you could tell us a bit, before we have a chance to listen to the piece, I would love to hear from you, like, what was it like creating this piece? I think both knowing that it was going to be this definitive work of Métis music, that it's the first Métis song cycle. And then at the same time, I'm curious, why specifically Marilyn Dumont, and why these poems specifically? Because she's got such a rich output and so many amazing works. So I'd love it if you could just talk us through some of that process.
One of the pieces that I was very insistent on was creating a work that would center Métis texts, that where the composer was Métis and where the performer was Métis. And so that was really important to say, we can occupy these critical spaces of the work and the work's performance, and all have this particular vantage that we're coming from. I have to say about why Marilyn Dumont. Oh, okay. So I was a young man in an English class at the University of Toronto. I was an undergrad student and I was studying English literature. And we had a CanLit class that had this really interesting reading list. But one of the sections was sort of exploring Indigenous representation in Canada. We read actually a bunch of Greg Schofield's work, whose work is absolutely beautiful, another Métis writer, and Marilyn Dumont's work. And this would have been 1999 or 2000. And so she had just published this collection. This was her first collection of poems called A Really Good Brown Girl. And we read the title piece, A Really Good Brown Girl, and another piece in the cycle or in the collection called The White Judges. And that was a really defining moment for me. I was sitting in this class downtown Toronto, and I was reading these words that were speaking a story and experience that I had or that I knew of, if I hadn't directly had that experience. But she was doing it with this kind of energy and this, I guess the best way to put it would be like a badassery. She was just like no holds barred, direct, sometimes scathing, sometimes, as we can see, like, using deep satire and using all of the kind of wonderful tools of language and images. And it was really an homage to her experience as being, trying to be that really good brown girl. That's the expectation that was of her, of existing between worlds and not feeling like she was on either side of the world, but in this middle ground. And so that was the real impetus. And when I had the opportunity to write these in 2017, it was hard to sort of cull the collection down. But what I tried to do is find these 5 that created a narrative or something of a narrative journey or an emotional journey through the cycle, so that it could be this pleasing work. And at its center is this kind of centerpiece, which I'm sure we'll talk about later, the poem Helen Betty Osborne. You go on a journey with the singer, who herself goes on a journey through these songs.
Yeah. Oh, I just remember hearing that piece for the first time, and that's exactly what it felt like, even as an audience member, like the ways you are asked to go on a journey with these songs is really, it's really remarkable. It's really touching. Every time I listen to it, I learn something new, or I think about it in a new way. And that's one discussion I would love to have together before we listen to the song cycle, which is if maybe each of us could share. The song cycle is 19 minutes. We debated breaking it up into clips and talking about them in intervals together tonight. And then I think we all just kind of came to the conclusion that we didn't want to break up this journey. But we also know that 20 minutes is a long time to stay engaged in something online. So I'd love it if each of us could maybe share something we'd like for the audience to hold on to or be aware of while they're listening to the piece. Rebecca, would you like to start us off?
Sure, yeah. I think what's important to remember when you listen to these pieces, I've often said they're like a crash course for understanding, for a quick way into the Métis experience. You have so much covered. You have missing, murdered Indigenous women. You have loss of language, loss of culture, reclamation, and finding ways to get back in there and reconnect. You have hiding, ashamedness of your own skin, which is the funnel and remnants of and still actually current feelings of assimilation. There's so much covered in here. So I think when we're going into it, just please keep an open mind and really listen for the nuances of Ian's music accompanying this very dense but beautiful text.
Yeah, such a good point, Rebecca. Thank you. Ian, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, I would say listen for the drama that is in the poems and hopefully in the music as well. The dramatic line that the journey of listening to the work brings us through. I think the only other thing I'd add to what Rebecca said is the real sense of humor as well. In a couple of moments, I think Indigenous people are funny people, and I think there's a lot of reasons for being funny, and sometimes that's a survival mechanism, and sometimes that's just a method of expression, and just and that side of things, even though there's a lot of darkness and heaviness that's explored in the cycle, there is a lightness to it as well, even if it's a bit scathing and a bit bitter at times. So go on the emotional journey. I think that would be my word to people listening to it.
Oh, yeah, I love that. The one thing I would add, as someone who's both been an audience member listening to this cycle, and also as a historian, is the idea of, even as a Métis woman, there are allusions and almost inside jokes or inside commentary throughout the words and in the music that I didn't know about, that were part of my history. And I remember almost feeling uncomfortable that I didn't know. So I'd really like to invite everyone to lean into and be aware of the fact that you're not going to understand everything you're about to hear, and to lean into some of that discomfort of not knowing, and to experiencing some of the stories and the narratives we leave out of the history of Canada. And I think with that, unless anyone has anything to add, I'd love for us to just listen to and experience this music.
Dear John, I'm still here in half-breed after all these years. You're dead. Funny thing. That railway you wanted so badly, there was talk a year ago of shutting it down from sea to shining sea. And you know, John, after all that shuffling us around to suit the settlers, we're still here and Métis. We're still here after Meech Lake and one no good for nothing Indian hole. nation. And John, that goddamn railroad never made this a great nation, 'cause the railway shut down, and this country's still quarreling over unity. And Riel is dead, but he just keeps coming back in all the Bill Wilsons, yet to speak out of turn or favor. Because you know as well as I that we were railroaded by some steel tracks that didn't last, and some settlers who wouldn't settle. And it's funny we're still here and calling ourselves half-breed. God only knows Mary tried to say these things, but her lips cracked and words fell out like mad woman's change. God only knows she tried, but we all thought she was crazy. A little twisted Mary was in one of her spins again. Who knows who she would twist into it like hair in a French braid. God knows Mary tried to keep us clean and fed respectable, but all the bleach and soup bones in the red and white couldn't keep our half-breed hides from showing through. Betty, if I set out to run, It might turn out instead to be about me or any one of my female relatives. It might turn out to be about this young native girl growing up in rural Alberta. In a town with fewer Indians than ideas about Indians. In a town just south of the Aryan Nation. It might turn out to be about Anna May Aquash, Donald Marshall, or Richard Cardinal. It might even turn out to be about our grandmothers, beasts of burden in the fur trade, skinning, scraping, pounding, barking, left behind for British standards of womanhood, left for white, melting-skinned women, not bits of brown women, left here in this wilderness, this colony. If I start to write a poem about you, it might turn out to be about hunting season instead. About open season on native women. It might turn out to be about your face, young and hopeful, staring back at me. Oh no, from a black and white page. It might be about the townsfolk, gentle word. townsfolk who believed native girls were easy and less likely to complain. If a sexual proposition led to violence, Betty, if I write this poem, shutting off a dripping faucet, so there is no leak, not a drop. My eyes want to push out through mind skin. Arms and legs are propelled through numb air. Words writhe, wrists flare, escaping numbness. No sound, no sound, no movement. Stuck, a blank wound in a rope ball. Tight, hard spun, a drill bit piercing earth, whir of steel, exhaling raw dust. Drill bit biting, dog gnawing bone, gripping ivory, anchoring down on grinding. Giving up to giving over. Lurch, lurching, laconic dance. Drum rattle, gangly movement, offbeat, arm bent overhead, legs straight out, head twisted and shift of body. To next feral contortion, animal skin taut, blood paint, ochre skin, ash smell. Pebbles encased, trapped in sound. Pebbles rasp against thin, dry skin. A herd of rattles overtakes me. Is there a received pronunciation of Cree? Is there a modern Cree usage? The chief's Cree, not the king's English. As if violating God the Father and standard English is like talking backwards. As if speaking the devil's language is talking back. Backwards. Back to your mother's sound, your mother's tongue, your mother's language. Back to that clearing in the bush, in the tall black spruce near the sound of horses and wind, where you sat on her knee in a canvas tent, and she fed you bannock and tea and syllables that echo in your mind now. Now that you can't make the sound of that voice that rocks you and sings you to sleep. In the devil's language.
I've heard this piece probably at least a dozen times, and I'm still speechless every time after I hear it. Especially now, because I feel like this is a piece that would never not have an enormous amount of significance. But when I think about the time we're living in, everything that's happening in Canada right now, we keep discovering more bodies of Indigenous children every day. There's a convoy in Ottawa right now that would look a lot different if it were Indigenous people protesting, and just so many different acts of the ongoing legacy of, not even the legacy, the ongoing impact of colonial violence in Canada. So one of the things I'd really love to discuss together tonight is what resonates for you louder than ever about these pieces. There's so much that was already there in 2017, 2018, but is there anything that lands differently for you performing it or thinking about its composition now?
I can't tell if Ian's gonna go or if I'm gonna go. I'll go. Every time I sing these pieces, I find something new. So what struck me a lot this time was the second piece, and how much is really in there. And I think why it struck me so much more this time is because I've had the opportunity to hear just more stories. I've had more years on the earth, and more encounters with Indigenous people, and the poetry in the second song is just so viscerally real. To hear about Indigenous people, our people sitting in baths full of bleach to lighten their skin, and scrubbing away, and that feeling of that the sound of the word scrubbing and the feeling of etching away and ripping and tearing away so much more than just the skin, everything underneath it, the sound of the language, the devil's language, all of these terms and all of this text just really starts to leap out now that I know more, and I know more of our stories. So that piece is getting harder to sing. But I'm grateful, because I would rather be in a constant situation where I'm learning more, and things are opening up, and than the other way around. I don't want these songs to stay the same. I think they're extremely relevant, and that we should all take a look at why that is.
Yeah, for me, it was, in putting these words into, well, I should say, in selecting these poems and asking Marilyn Dumont if I could make a work out of them, a new work out of them. I gravitated to these because they were so real, and they were so relevant. And I mean, even 5 years ago now, when I wrote these, I remember trying to I guess shop around is the right word, this work to organizations and groups and performance places, and people just, even they did not have an appetite for this kind of work. I don't know that there is an appetite for this kind of work now, but there is so much different sort of perspective on or at least a new centering of Indigenous experience in this country, where there are spaces to talk about this work. But it seemed people were disinterested. I think what hits me really powerfully is just Dumont's incredible use of language, and her comment on language, just this idea of, and it's everywhere, like these were in the second poem that Rebecca was talking about, this idea that these were the words that this woman Mary, we don't ever know who she is, wanted to say, but the words fell out like mad woman's change. It's about her wanting to say a thing, but the thing can never be said. The play between the red and white, which is the color of the flag, but it's also the whiteness and the redness that is contained within one body, a Métis body, and how you're scrubbing one out to be more acceptable. That middle poem about Helen Betty Osborne, it's all about wanting to have language to write a poem for her, and the singer is looking, in a sense, at a black and white photo, this iconic photo of Helen Betty Osborne, and thinking of all of the people, all of the stories of grandmothers, of Anime Aquash, about all these figures within resistance movements in Indigenous communities. And then finally, the last poem, I think this idea of the backwardness of language, right? Like how speaking Cree is somehow talking backwards. It's not the King's English. It's not the proper English. And she plays a lot on the proper use of language, but that this talking backwards, meaning going back to the Cree and talking back in the sense of the response to like the authority, is a way of reconnecting to this beautiful image that we're left with, which is this canvas tent sitting on a mother's lap, drinking tea and eating bannock, and listening to syllables that no longer have a particular meaning because that language has been lost. I mean, it's just this incredible collection of thoughts on language, on the use of language, the power of language, with these wondrous, like, great historic figures named in these poems. I mean, they're just, I think, I can't say enough about Marilyn Dumont's writing, but it is literally a wealth of some of the most beautiful writing I've ever read in my life. There are even in this one collection of the many collections she's written, there are so many more poems I want to set. And I just would die to get to work with her texts more. But I think, let me just say, and I've been long-winded here, but I think this is something that if as a composer, the only texts I could set were texts by Indigenous poets, there would be more words than I could ever hope to set in 10 lifetimes of incredible beauty and power, just like these. We have such a body of incredible writers and thinkers, and this is just the tip of the iceberg of it.
Yeah, and I think they all, and we all, on some level, all want to write a letter to John A. Macdonald. Maybe, can you just do an entire song cycle of letters to John A. Macdonald? I'm just I totally come.
And isn't it great? Like, Dear John, it's a Dear John letter, like you used to be able to write in the paper. As a kid, I don't know if you guys remember, but I remember there was like a Dear Abby or Dear John. These sort of, it's just brilliant. It's brilliant.
Brilliant. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. I've had so many opportunities to ask questions that I'd love to open it into. Ian, Rebecca, do you have anything you'd like to ask each other about this work or about your experiences with it?
Can I go first and ask the first question?
Yes, please. Did you see my panic?
Well, okay. It's interesting. I mean, you sort of touched on this, Rena, but I think it's really interesting to revisit a work at multiple points in your career. And in some ways, I mean, we were both at completely different places in our career when we were first working together on this cycle. And what has that? I guess how has the cycle changed, or how has engaging this work changed? But also, how have you changed in that time?
So when we first, you reached out to me, I was still living in the UK, and I've told you this story, but I will say it again briefly for everyone else watching. So in my final years, in my final years of my master's and my undergrad, the singer has to present a recital, and I searched endlessly for something Métis to present, something of myself that I could share with everyone. And there was just nothing that was true. There were some things, but they were not written by Métis people, and they didn't ring true in my heart. So I went away to school, and I got this amazing email from a Métis composer named Ian, and I was like, oh, there's a Métis composer, oh my goodness, because I was worried that I was going to have to do this myself, and I can't write music. So I was like, thank goodness. Okay, so you had asked me if I had interest in working on these songs with you, and we met in a cafe, and you talked to me for a long time about why these songs were important, and I got to get to know you in that time too. And I just thought, wow, this is the thing that I thought I was going to have to wait my entire life for. I thought that I was going to have to do this work by myself, and that there wouldn't be any support, there wouldn't be any interest. And so I'd even gone as far to, I'm kidding myself here, no talent in music writing at all. I'd even gone to Manitoba, to Winnipeg, to the archives in Saint Boniface to try and find some Métis texts. And luckily, it didn't have to go this far to where I'm like writing things, because you'd already written something that was so beautiful and covered all of these things that I wanted to speak about, but I was really young and I didn't have the words to actually say it yet. So these songs are a gift because, in 2017, I know who I am. I know that I'm Métis. I've grown up in my culture, but it's something else to have another person who understands and can lend themselves, and it becomes this collaborative. It becomes a duet, and then it becomes a trio, and becomes a whole orchestra when you add in the actual orchestra. And I think what a gift, because I truly did think that this would be something that I would strive for a lot of, like, I would be looking for and searching for. These are the songs that I was looking for, thankfully, only for a few years. But then I think about, and that makes me really, that really humbles me, because I think about all of the people who have worked in this area and who have, as you've said, written. There's so much out there. There's so much art out there. There's so much text, poetry, books. There's music. There's storytelling. There are plays. There's so much out there. We've been here this entire time. And the fact that I'm a little fourth year at Western University and I'm like, I can't find anything, that says a lot, actually, because it's all there. So this is a real, for me, it's extremely meaningful, and I'm really grateful that we can share it with everyone. I'm gonna button myself there because I've talked a lot. I hope I answered the question. I have a question for Ian too. Sorry, Rena.
No, don't be.
I'm like, where did I put it? Okay, so I wrote it down because I have to. Okay, Ian. This song cycle explores many facets of Métis identity, from missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, loss of culture and language, intentional assimilation as a means for survival, reclamation, and resilience. Can you speak a bit about the texts? I know you have already, but if there's anything else that you want to add, and the choice to add music in the way that you have, and the beauty that you've chosen to add to some really difficult themes.
Well, that's a great question. I'll answer the second part of that, because I think I spoke a little bit about the first part of that. I think the important thing and the responsibility of composers, well, this is just my opinion, so I'm sure there's other composers who would disagree, but is to serve the text. I mean, the text is the heartbeat, it is the roadmap, it is the guide, it informs everything. And so I'm sort of one of those composers that would approach setting text, which I get to do almost with every work I write, which is why I think I write so much for singers. But by honoring what has been placed there, understanding that in giving a musical landscape and world for it, we're creating a different kind of a different journey, a different way of experiencing the work. That it becomes, the technical word, I guess, is it becomes a derivative work. You get a second work out of it that derives from the first work, the poem or the text or the play, whatever it might be. I think it's interesting. I've thought about a little bit about this set of songs. I mean, it was one of the first song cycles I wrote, and it was very full on in terms of its heavy subject matter, and that was really important to me. And I think it was so important to me because I realized just what you were saying a moment ago, that this didn't exist before. I mean, at least it didn't exist that I had seen. I didn't know of other people writing art music that was hitting this kind of core of experience. Certainly there are works that touch on Indigenous culture, and often I found them to be very cursory or very distant or very like idolized or idealized. This really hit to the core of what I felt like was happening in the world and happening around us. And so that's why I kind of went there. But in terms of the types of texts that I've set since, there've never really been any as hard and right to the heart of the matter as this one. But I needed to write this set of songs, probably more for me, maybe also for us, in that way, it's a really personal cycle. It was like I needed to say this, and I needed to get this off my chest. And I mean, okay, Marilyn Dumont gave me all of the ways of getting it off my chest already. So, but it was an act of saying, like, could this live on the concert stage and be a part of the repertoire and tell of an experience that is not one that we've seen in these spaces. And so, yeah, so I don't think I answered your question at all, but I'll leave it at that.
Yes, you did. Yes, you did. all I'll add is there's a reason that Ian's work is echoing across the land, is because it resonates with us, and we want to hear it, and we want to be involved. And I think that much is clear in the way that Rena and I speak about and gush about the work. It feels of us, and that is extremely important. And even though the subject matter is difficult, and it rings true, and it means so much to be seen. And I think what we're talking about here too is just that there was a desire from both of us to feel this representation of our communities, and we hadn't seen it yet. So we make the space. It's an amazing thing it's an incredibly fulfilling thing to be involved in. And I know that it's also helped many others, many up and coming musicians that are Indigenous are very inspired by these pieces. And I think that's an incredible thing to take away. Massey, Ian.
Well, and inspired by seeing someone like you singing this kind of work. I think it's all of those pieces together intersecting in a way that is very, very important. And, you know, I think about this as this is like a 50-year project. It's probably like a 150-year project, but it is a project of saying, like, we are rebuilding and building a repertoire, and we are building a body of performance, and we are being those examples to the next generation that goes, oh, could I do this? Yeah. Like, I don't want like Indigenous or like Métis composition to end with me. Not that it ends with me, but in the sense of there have to be 50 more people that come. Then I'll feel like, okay, I did something right, or I was a part of that movement. Just like I want there to be 50 more mezzos, and, you know, just to say, like, we have this space, but I know we're a part of an important work at this point in the building of that group of people that say, oh, I could do that too. And if you're watching right now, you can do it, and I'll help you do it, and so will Rebecca.
Yes, so get over here.
Yeah, well, and I think you're really touching on, like, both of you have just been such a gift to our community. It's like, especially, I find so often in the collaborations we see out of our community, and especially this one, like, we've completely broken whatever theory exists in Western art music if there has to be a hierarchy. Like, we don't have this clear-cut dividing line between composer, interpreter. Like, it's, at the end of the day, whenever I watch this, I feel like it's something the two of you created together. And
that's a fantastic thing, because that shows our way is collaboration, is circular, right? Like, we sit in a circle together, and Ian's been really great about that as well. Like, if it doesn't work, we could just change it. Right?
Nothing's too precious.
That's a pleasure of working with a living composer, for sure.
And I think, like,
sorry to interrupt you, Rena.
And I'm totally interrupting too, but it's the way we need to work. Like, it is, you're totally right, Rena. It is the way. I think that, like, the colonial systems would be really better off if they learn from these practices, because it's so much more enjoyable way of of being in relation with people and making work, and you can be so much more creative and productive. You kind of need to, it's a little bit of the drop the egos and drop the like, I am the boss of the thing. Like that doesn't serve anybody. And we all go there at moments, but then to let it go and say, this is a collaborative effort. A work is not alone written by a librettist or a text writer. It's not alone written by a composer. It is that plus the performers plus the audience receiving and completing that work that is the action, right, of making or of making an artistic work. And if you think of it that way, it's so much more exciting and enjoyable and less scary too.
Yes.
Yeah, and I just feel like you've both been such generous leaders in bringing other young people and emerging artists of all ages, and even music historians, into this fold of feeling like we can belong in these spaces. And I don't think we've told Rebecca this, but Ian and I are actually thinking of collaborating on a piece because Ian convinced me to start composing again.
Stop. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so that's what I would love to leave as kind of a concluding note before we open questions up to the audience. That the three of us chose to name this program We Are Still Here because we're still here and we're still making stories. And this is one of them, and there's going to be so many more in the world as time goes on. But I'd also love to, I say this a lot to my history students, and I don't mean it in a confrontational way. You are still here. Non-Indigenous Canadians are still here. And the work of reconciliation and of Indigenous resurgency is something that takes all of us working together. So I would love to bring that idea into this space, and in doing so, open the floor to questions from the audience. So I see we have one from Mary. I know the piece exists in different instrumentations. The words are so compelling. Does the instrumentation make a difference in the meaning of the words or in the experience of performing?
Yeah, so this is a really interesting work in that it's had a lot of iterations. So the original version in 2017 that Rebecca premiered was for a chamber orchestra. It was 14 musicians and Rebecca and conductor. And then I created a piano version, which is the one we hear, but it's more just a sort of for function. It was not the way I was intended to hear it with the piano. And then created a piano quintet version. So that would be piano and 4 strings, like a string quartet. And then I've had an ask for a quartet version, just a string quartet alone. So it's like minus the piano out. And I'm also creating a full orchestra version that will be recorded this year by the Regina Symphony. And so there are so many different iterations and different takes on it. And I would say that it does change in the setting. I think that there is a level of, just very purely musical, mechanical things, like in terms of the level of resonance or the color palettes that you can play with. I remember in the original version, there was like a woodwind section, and it really kind of highlighted some of these upper ideas that were in dialogue with the vocal part. And we don't get that so much in the piano version. There are things that just have to be cut out because it's not playable in a smaller version. And so from a musical perspective, you get different things get highlighted, but it also works differently in different spaces, right? To hear this in a huge hall with the full orchestra is a different experience unto it. In and of itself. So that's my perspective on it. I'm not always a great, like to reconceive of a work in a different way. It's a whole like mental activity and exercise. But it is interesting once that work is done to hear it in different ways and to receive it differently. And so I feel like as the composer, I also am just sitting as an audience member and going, oh, that's sort of different than the other one. And I'm learning the differences along with other audiences.
I mean, I'll just add too, like singing it. I'm an opera singer, so I'm not really used to using a mic or being in a recording studio. And so this was the version that you watched with sound streams. This was a very different approach, and I'd also done it with Greg initially in 2017 with the orchestra. So I find that in terms of singing the piece, this delivery with sound streams is a lot quieter and a lot more reserved and a little bit more contemplative as well, just because of the piano and the way that we were recording, and Greg had to be apart from me. We weren't feeling that connection in the same way because of COVID, etc. It was just very different. So that on top of finding new discoveries in the pieces every time I sing them, there's also this added, like, what's it going to feel like with this instrumentation each time? So that's very interesting too. Oh, you're muted. You're muted, my friend.
Oh, somehow I hit the mute button. I see we also have a question from Rosemary McCarney, speaking to Rebecca's comment that this repertoire, as it builds, rings across the land. Rebecca, do you think non-Indigenous Canadians are also eager to hear this art form in a spirit of many paths of reconciliation?
I think they should be. I kind of, you know what? I'm going to say this. I expect you to be. I'm at the point now where I expect you to be interested to hear this music, because if we're going to walk this reconciliation walk and do all of these events and talk about reconciliation, then we have to actually do it. And it can't be sort of this thing that we talk about that we don't actually see anything change from. It begins to fall flat for us. So what I can say in terms of, what I can say is this piece is being scheduled. People want to hear it. I'm being asked to sing it very often. Got asked the other day, yesterday. So I should mention that, Ian. Sorry. Was asked if I would perform it the other day. And people do want to hear it. They're at least it's wanting to be programmed, which I think is a step in the right direction. The problem is that people simply don't know until they, like, as we've said, that this was an opportunity for me to sing about my own culture and for Ian to write about his own culture in this way for the first time. It's the same for the audiences. They're hearing these songs for the first time, and they're experiencing how deeply they resonate. And I would also just add too that sitting in truth with us is the fastest way to heal together, to actually sit with the hard truth. We can move forward if we actually just participate fully and bring our spirits to it. It's not easy, but this is something that we sit in every day. So 20 minutes is not really that big of an ask. Sorry to get sassy, but Rosemary.
Actually, that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much, Ian, Rebecca, for sharing your time with us and your thoughts, and just for creating and collaborating and sharing this music with us. And I think with that, I'm going to turn things back over to Hannah and thank everyone for their time and their questions and for joining us for this evening.
Thank you, Ian, Rebecca, and Rena, for this really moving presentation. I'm so glad that we can actually have this presentation up for other people to see, not just for tonight, but hopefully for a while longer, so they can experience your insights about your creative process your experiences, and with this incredible piece. And yeah, it's I'm even thinking of the Salon title right now, and thinking of the fact that that is a pretty much a European concept, you know, in this very intimate setting, and here you are, you know, you're still here in this space, and it's amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. On behalf of the Massey College Music Society, thank you to Matt Glanfield for producing tonight's event, and to Alyssa Ginsberg for coordinating. And thank you to all of you for joining us online, and we hope you've enjoyed this salon. We're pleased to announce that we have another event coming up on March 16th. This time we're heading into the world of jazz with Juno Award-winning musician Jocelyn Gould and Massey College Junior Fellow and Jazz bassist Sam Little for a salon entitled Modernizing the Tradition Jazz Guitar in the 21st Century. Please see the Massey College website for more details, and we'll hope you join us. Until then, stay safe, stay warm, and good night.